Hello and welcome to Mindscapes, a series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today was once a Jain monk, inspired by the teachings of Gandhi. It was a role that he gave up and moved on to a lifetime of discovery and learning. He was inspired by Schumacher, the patron saint of the idea small is beautiful. He's currently director of programs at the Schumacher College in the United Kingdom. I'm delighted to welcome Satish Kumar.
Pleasure to be with you.
Welcome.
Yes.
Small is beautiful. That's a fading concept in some ways, apart from small circles of influence, passion, and commitment, and this huge swell of the global. How does the small reconcile itself with the universal? It does.
It does. Universe is made of small elements. And that's how we see human beings as part of those elements. And therefore, when I say small is beautiful, I define small as human scale. Because when we start to grow from our childhood, we become larger and taller and taller. But a stage comes when we stop growing physically and hopefully start growing spiritually, intellectually, emotionally. In the same way, if the organizations, businesses, hospitals, schools, governments, institutions become too big, they lose that human contact, human touch. So after a certain stage, the organizations should grow in quality and in spirituality rather than growing in numbers and budget and money. So that's my idea of small is beautiful.
I was going through the programs that Schumacher College runs, in which you are the director of programs. And there were a number of programs that relate to business.
Yes.
And obviously with the economy being sort of, or economics being a dominant, determining force in global discourse and global interactions today, that's very critical.
Yeah.
But the premise of that is that big is successful, small might be beautiful, and economies of scale and globalization and a whole range of interconnectednesses. So what is it that you really say to business?
We say to business that, all right, you are going global, but is it sustainable in long terms? Not just for 50 years or 100 years when you are making a lot of money and you are successful, but is it sustainable? If you are successful, you have cars, you have big organizations, you have big houses, you have big offices, big buildings, but people working in those organizations are not fulfilled, are not happy. Then what is good of just success? So success should have two complementary elements. One is success should be sustainable, and the second is success should be fulfilling to human beings who are working in those organizations or businesses. And this is what we are teaching, and businesses are coming to our college.
Well, this may be a concept that you could more easily, persuade a Bill Gates or a business that, and I'm not sure he'd be persuaded, but let's say businesses which are led by individual visionaries, so a Henry Ford or a G.D. Birla or whoever. What happens to this sort of amorphous, faceless global organization which has a dynamic with an element of destructiveness, as you've so eloquently articulated, all of its own?
When organizations become so dominant that human beings become just a cog in the machine, that is where the big has become ugly and big has become dominant. So it is the human spirit which we have to evoke, and we have not to look for great leaders like Henry Ford or somebody like that, but even small people who are working in organizations, they have to create a collective energy and come together to say, is this right for us? And that energy is possible. And at the moment, you can see all over the world, there is a great opposition to this global ethics and globalization idea. People are saying, all right, we have been, say for example in India, working to make successful businesses and big governments and big organizations for 50 years. But have we solved the problems of human concerns, of poverty, of education, of health for ordinary people?
I think that what we're really beginning to say in India is that we've had some things that were large enough to be India-centric and large in the Indian context, and maybe it wasn't large enough and now we should just go global. That seems to be the dominant philosophy at this time.
I think that is a misguided philosophy in my view. I think India is a big country, and India in itself is a world in a sort of miniature, so to speak. So everything is here. If Indian businesses can fulfill the needs of Indian people, they have achieved enough. When people forget enough, when enough is enough, they will never find enough. However much you have, you will never have enough. Therefore, the challenge for a business or a government or an organization is to find that level when you know enough is enough.
Isn't there a risk, or shall I say, isn't it already happening in some ways, that ideas such as you expound are enormously attractive, intellectually, emotionally, and what the community is really doing is sort of putting them up there on a pedestal like Gandhi and saying, that's wonderful, we should emulate this and let's pay homage to this, but meanwhile, let's get on with globalization. Isn't that what's really happening?
That is actually happening, that kind of hypocrisy, where we pay lip service to good people like Gandhi and others, but then in practice we don't do it. But I think there is a new hope. Now consciousness around the world, and I'm traveling around the world with my Schumacher College as well. People are coming to Schumacher College from around the world, and people are saying, for last 50 years since the war, we have gone after this technological, this industrial, this scientific revolution. Day after day after day, we have made progress, and yet human beings are not happy. Yet environment is being destroyed. Yet our air is not good. Water is not clean. Our global warming and climate change is happening. Where are we going? This deep questioning I find everywhere. This is what gives me hope.
But do you feel that there are sufficient numbers for this to be able to tangibly impact processes of policy and economics?
Not enough. Not yet. Not yet. It's the beginning. I think in last 10 years or so, this new consciousness of ecological, social, spiritual, bringing together these values is a new movement. But if you take examples like Seattle, where thousands of people gathered, like Prague, where thousands of people gathered, to raise the voice, the small is beautiful. Why and where are you leading us in this abyss? I think that's a good beginning.
It's sort of often argued that this discourse is really the privilege in some ways of the middle ground, the truly influential in global terms, the corporations just go about their business regardless, and the poor who are sort of struggling for survival can't be bothered with issues of pollution and genetic engineering. If it brings them more food, that's an immediate, tangible need, and so that is met. How do you react to this sort of this criticism, this comment that this is just an indulgence of the middle ground?
This is not quite true. This is the critique of those who do not want to see the groundswell of opinions. Of course, when you are very poor, survival for you is more important. But if you go in small villages of India or other South Asian countries or Africa, people are still very happy to be who they are. And they are very happy to cultivate their land, make their good things, and they don't want to have genetically engineered food thrust upon them. Because what genetically engineered food or other technological innovations do, they take away the power of people, from the people, to big centers of engineering, scientific laboratories, and so on. People are made powerless. And if people are made powerless, they are not going to bear with it. So small farmers, peasant farmers, even in France, like Beauvais, stood up, and there were 50,000 peasants gathering together, protesting against this Coca-Colaization or McDonaldization of France. Even in France, farmers and small peasants who run farmers' markets, make cheese, make wine, make local bread, make local things. They are standing against this global forces of McDonald's and Coca-Cola everywhere. So this is not true that the small farmers and peasant farmers are not interested in these issues. Only the middle class intellectuals are interested. But of course, those who want to put such movements down say, oh, this is only a middle class phenomena. But this is not the true picture.
In terms of your own personal striving and evolution, in terms of your need to relate the personal with the social, with the public, you became a Jain monk when you were very young.
Yeah.
And the readings of Gandhi brought about this sort of, well, revelation might be too dramatic a word,
yeah.
perhaps realization
Yes.
Of a larger social
Yes.
context or
Yeah.
obligation.
Yeah.
What was the process? What happened? What was it like being a Jain monk?
Yes, yes. I mean, as a Jain monk, I was totally committed to the principles of non-violence and truth. But I was practicing non-violence and truth in a personal way. There was a personal non-violence and a personal truth. When I read Gandhi, he said, there's no good a few people going in a monastic order or living in a cave and practicing truth and non-violence in a very nice way. It's a very self-satisfactory, but majority of people can't do it, and they will think that spirituality is only for the saints and sadhus. Ordinary people cannot practice truth and non-violence. So the real challenge is to bring spirituality, truth, non-violence in everyday life. Everyday life. So he said, our mission, my mission, is to bring politics and spirituality together. Practice non-violence and truth in politics, in business, in commerce, in agriculture, in industry, wherever we are. Unless we transform our everyday life, ordinary life, into spiritual life, spirituality is no good. That reading in Gandhi's book, I was so inspired, challenged, also unsettled. I said, I'm doing totally the different thing. I'm taking non-violence as a personal thing, just for my own salvation. But he is saying that non-violence has to be social and political. So I decided to leave the monastic order and join this idea that you cannot have this dualistic and separation-oriented thing. And you must practice non-violence in society.
So what was it like leaving a monastic order, leaving the vows, leaving a whole community?
Yeah.
A commitment that you had made.
It was hard. I was full of anguish. It was a painful decision because not only leaving the order, but leaving my guru, my acharya, and leaving my commitment. Because once you are a Jain monk, you are a monk forever.
How did you become a monk?
How did I become a monk? When I was 4 years old, my father died. I didn't understand what was happening. So I asked my mother, what is happening? Why my father is not speaking and talking to me? And my mother said, your father is dead. And we are all going to die. And a 4-year-old child I was. And I remember vividly. I said, is there any way we can avoid this death? And my mother said, I don't know these sort of questions. You must go and ask our sadhus, our Jain munis, monks. And so I went. I was 5-year-old, then 6-year-old, and I grew slowly, and I kept going to the monks. And the monks said that if you want to be free of the cycle of birth and death, you have to renounce the world and become a monk. I said, I'll do anything to avoid death, to free from death. So my father and nobody's father die. So at the age of 9, in the quest of freeing myself from this cycle of birth and death, particularly death, I decided to take the monkhood and became a Jain sadhu.
This is a sort of archetypical motivation. This
Yes.
isn't something that drove the Buddha, drove Mahavir. This response to death, was it fearful? Was it anguish? Was it just questioning? What did you fear?
I fear that there is a loss. When my father died, everybody was feeling that loss. Everybody was crying, mourning. That loss seemed to me so unbearable. That was the pain, the anguish. And so I said, there should be a way by which people can stop dying. So nobody will feel that, those tears in their eyes. Nobody would feel that sadness, that sorrow, which has enveloped, engulfed my whole family. That sorrow was the greatest challenge.
Did you fear your own death or the death of those close to you and their sense of loss? Was there a personal fear? What's going to happen?
I mean, at that time, because I was only 4 years old, I didn't quite focus that I will die and what will happen to me. But my mother said that she will die. As my father has died, she will die. And that felt very strong. I felt, how am I going to live with my mother? So that was the sense of loss which gave me a kind of unsettling of mind. And I was so unsettled that my mother said, why are you not eating properly? Why are you not doing things, going to the school as other children do? I was feeling so sad that only place where I felt a little bit of solace was with the monks, where they said that there is a way of freeing yourself from this cycle of birth and death. And you have to become a Muni. You have to renounce the world. I said, I will do anything you tell me. I want to be free.
And in the process of renunciation, you obviously didn't find the complete answer.
Yes, I mean, after 9 years as a monk, I did realize that it's the fear of death which is more sorrowful than the death itself. And death is not really the end of life. It's a door into new life. It's a cycle which continues.
What has the inspiration of Gandhi given you outside the monastery in terms of your own evolution, growth, attitude to death, for example, that the monastery failed?
I mean, Gandhi's great contribution in my life is to show that we exist always and only in relationships. We do not exist by ourselves. Whereas, because he was a social man, whereas the monastic order gave me personal salvation idea. Whereas, I mean, for example, in the West, Descartes, he says, I think, therefore I am, which is a very individualistic statement. My thinking and my mind and I decide how I exist. Whereas Gandhi was more coming out of this Hindu tradition where we always believe in Soham, which means you are, therefore I am. We exist in relationship. We are part of this web of relationships. Earth is, therefore I am. If the earth did not exist and did not produce food, I will not exist. However much I think in my head, I will not be able to exist. My parents are, therefore I am. Society is, therefore I am. My ancestors were, therefore I am. So Gandhi's influence on my life is to give me this perception of relationships. And that is where my ecology and my social values come in. Because for me, Gandhi's message was that spirituality is no spirituality unless it brings an end to social injustice. Spirituality is no spirituality, and love is no love unless it brings an end to economic exploitation and injustice. And it creates a love for nature, for trees, for plants, for animals, and for people.
Have you felt a personal lack, perhaps in some ways, between the intellectual insight of what Gandhi taught and your own ability to sort of embody and practice this?
Absolutely, because without experience and without practice, intellectual theory is not enough.
So what are some of the elements of this practice? Gandhi had sort of manifests an extreme practical, concrete, engaging in very physical terms too, along with the spiritual. That he would go and clean a toilet, he would do things that would actually establish this relationship, this transformation. And that seems to be a struggle many of us have, that you have an intellectual insight, there's an intellectual excitement about a concept, but when it comes to transforming that into our own instinctual responses, we fail.
Yeah, that's true. But in the Indian tradition, we always use the word achar vichar, which means practice and then theory. Whereas in our Western words or Western language, we always say theory, practice. Out of practice, intellectual ideas mature. So that was the Gandhi's idea too. And for me, the biggest practice which has formed me is walking. Because I decided to walk from India to Europe and to America. And I walked 10,000 miles without any money, like a Jain sadhu, more or less, for peace. And when you are walking day by day on the earth, through mountains, through deserts, in the snow, in the rain, in the forest, and have no fear, and have no money, and therefore trust people. So practice of walking and meeting people and seeing the life diversity, the cultural diversity, the biodiversity, and see the world is a Garden of Eden, and we truly exist in relationship. Otherwise, we will not exist. So for me, my practice is walking.
Is there a significance to the fact that you sort of walked from India to the West and then sort of have stayed there and made that your base, your home?
Yeah. I walked to the West partly because I was inspired, like I was inspired by Gandhi, I was also inspired by Bertrand Russell. He, at the age of 90, protesting against the nuclear bomb, went to jail. I said, here's a man of 90 going to jail for peace in the world. What am I doing? So I will walk to Moscow, to Paris, to London, and to Washington, which are the 4 nuclear capitals at that time, and protest against the bomb. So that was the reason that I went west, because all those 4 nuclear capitals were in the West. But then I met Schumacher, The Small is Beautiful. And in 1975, I was in England. And Schumacher said that, look, there are many Gandhians in India, but we don't have many Gandhians in England. I would like you to work here and influence our thinking. And I would like you to edit Resurgence magazine. So that was the reason that he persuaded me, and I decided to stay in England and become the editor of Resurgence magazine.
When you visit India, do you think perhaps it's time for you to walk back?
It would be lovely. I would love to walk back from England to India and take 2 years and return to my roots by walking back.
I meant also sort of in a larger symbolic sense.
Yes.
Do you see that the values that you had sought to carry out of India perhaps have been lost here and need to be?
No, there is that desire to do something in India. And I have a very good friend here in India called Vandana Shiva. And with Vandana, we are planning a new project, which I could almost call it Schumacher College of the South. And we are going to call the place Bij Vidyalaya, a center for sustainable living. So that is going to be near Dehradun. And we want to create a college in India where these kind of ideas can be developed, can be studied, but also can be practiced. Always every age and every movement needs a new center, like a powerhouse, like energy center. And this center could be like that. When Gandhi was running independence movement, he created Sabarmati and then Sevagram. Rabindranath Tagore created Shantiniketan. There were many, many such great centers where people could come, they recharge their batteries, be re-inspired, take new ideas, get strength, and then go out and work. So we, Vandana and I, would like to create a college for sustainable living in India, so that we can say that we don't have to always fall for this monolithic industrial paradigm where everything has to be monoculture, same food, same architecture, same kind of clothing. Everything becomes so monotonous, monoculture of the mind. We want to create a center where Indian diversity of cultures, of religions, of languages, of growing food, of variety and diversity can be safeguarded. So that is our project. So I am, in that sense, metaphorically, returning to India, thanks to Vandana.
You had mentioned in the earlier part of our conversation, we talked a great deal about death. Gandhiji, when he died, had sort of Hey Ram on his lips. What would you like to have on your lips?
I would like to just say, Soham. That would be my desire, to die calling Soham. You are, therefore I am. The world is, therefore I am. And therefore I am being part of the world now. I'm going into the world, becoming the earth, becoming the air, fire and water, the elements. So that will be my mantra, Soham.
Satish Kumar, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation.
Pleasure.
Thank you.